Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make biscuits, also known as baking powder biscuits and tea biscuits. And this is what they look like. When these are freshly made, the outside is wonderfully crisp, yet inside they are soft and tender. Now you could serve these for breakfast with butter and jam. You could serve them with soups and stews, or you can even use them to make a strawberry shortcake. Now, if you live outside of the United States or Canada, you might be a little confused because for a lot of people, a biscuit means a cookie. So just think of this type of biscuit is very similar to a scone, or you may call them scones. So now, for the first thing that you will need to do is to preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 200 degrees Celsius, and then you will need to line your baking sheet with parchment paper, or you could just butter your baking sheet, spray it with one of those nonstick sprays, or even just lightly oil it. Now, a biscuit is a quick bread, and it is really quick to make. So when we start this, we can have hot biscuits on the table in under a half hour, so that's really good. I'm making this by hand. I'm not using my mixer. So you will need a large bowl, and first thing is 2.5 cups, 325 grams of all-purpose flour, plain flour, and to that I'm going to add 2.5 teaspoons, 10 grams of baking powder, a half a teaspoon, 2 grams of salt, and now this is entirely optional. If I'm making these for like breakfast to have butter and jam, or if I'm using them for a strawberry shortcake, I add 1 tablespoon, 15 grams of granulated white sugar. But if I was going to make these to have with soups or stews, a lot of times I leave out that sugar. So I'm going to leave that entirely up to you, whether you want to add the sugar or not. Some people don't like it. And so now I'm going to use a wire whisk to mix everything together. You could just use like a fork. You could use your fingers to do this. Just want to make sure that all the ingredients are really mixed together. And now we're going to add a half a cup, 113 grams of cold butter. I'm using unsalted butter. Now you could use salted butter, but then I would just leave out the salt in the recipe. Now I like to cut my butter into cubes because we're going to cut it into the flour, and it makes it easier than if you just had a block of butter. What I like to do is either like the night before, cut it into these cubes and cover it and put it back in the fridge, and that way each cube gets really cold. If you kind of forgot to do that, which I often do, you could cut it up and then just put it into the freezer for about 15 minutes before you start, and that'll get them really cold. So just put that right in here. And then I'm going to cut the butter into the flour. You could just use your fingers. I'm using this pastry blender. I love this tool. And you want to just cut it in until it's coarse crumbs. Okay, that looks good. As you can see, coarse crumbs. Don't worry if there's all the butter, it's not going to be the same size. So it's all right if there's bigger chunks. So scrape that off. So now next, what we're going to add is 1 large egg, and have your egg cold. That would be 1 large egg is 50 grams out of the shell, and 3/4 of a cup, 180 milliliters, 180 grams of cold milk. You can use, I'm using whole milk. You could use 2%. Just if you use whole milk, of course, your biscuits will taste a little more rich tasting than if, say, you used a reduced fat. Now, for those people that would prefer an eggless biscuit, then what you can do is just leave out the egg and increase your milk by another 1/4 of a cup, 60 milliliters, 60 grams. So, and the difference would be if you leave out the egg, your biscuits will be a little more bread-like. Using an egg, that's the best way I can describe it, using the egg makes them a little more cake-like. So, you know, you could try it both ways and see which one you like better. So I'm just going to whisk my egg. I'm using my small whisk here. You could just use a fork. So what I'm going to do is just make kind of a well in the center. And I'm going to put my egg. I'm not going to add all of my milk because you never know when you're making biscuits or even scones, you never know how much liquid your flour is going to absorb. So it's easier to add more. You can't take it away. And you don't want you want the ingredients to come together and be into a nice ball, but you don't want it really really wet. So I'm going to add like most of my milk. And then some people just use your hands. I will in a minute. Or you could use your spatula, fork. I'm just using this plastic scraper. These are really handy. And we're just going to bring this all together. I like to do this by hand because I am going to get my hands in there, because that way I can feel the dough. Sometimes if you do this with a machine, you have the tendency to overmix, and then your biscuits will be a little tough. Okay, now I'm going to scrape that up, and I am going to get my hands in there. Clean hands, of course. That way I can see if I need to add the rest of my milk. I think it's coming together pretty good, but I'm going to add just a little more. I will show you a way to clean your hands because I know they get very sticky. A little more. I'm going to need almost all of it. Okay, that looks good. Let's clean the bowl with. So now let's remove that. Put a little flour down. I'm going to form this like in a round, whatever shape. It's just put a little flour on top. I like mine fairly thick, so I'm going to just pat it. You could roll it with a rolling pin, but really I just use my hands till it's about 3/4 of an inch, about 2 centimeters thick. So if I do that, and I'm going to use this is almost a 3-inch cookie cutter, that's about 7.5 centimeters. I'm going to get about 8 biscuits. So if you like a thinner biscuit, or you want them smaller or larger, you may get a different amount of biscuits. Now before I cut this out, I just want to clarify, if you live in the States, this is not a recipe for what is called a Southern biscuit. Southern biscuit is quite a bit different. It uses it can use all-purpose, but it's usually a certain brand of flour. You don't use butter, you use lard, and that will give you a more flaky texture. No egg, and typically you use buttermilk. So I know it's not a Southern biscuit. Growing up in Canada, we always called these, like I said, like at the beginning, a baking powder biscuit, or even a tea biscuit. Now I'm going to lightly flour my cutter. Now some people like to cut, which I do, I just cut straight down. Some people say you need to twist. I'm going to leave that up to you, whether you want to twist it or straight down. And another difference with people, some people like to put all their biscuits together and then they kind of rise straight up. I don't mind if they're a little lopsided, so I just kind of space them around. But again, you can do it the way you want. And my last one. Typically, if I would make a large one, but for the video, I'm going to make them all the same size. So now, what I like to do is brush the tops of our biscuits. I'm just using milk. You use cream, whatever you have. And that's going to help with a little bit of shine and with browning. Some people like to, you could also use an egg wash. You take one egg with a little bit of milk and cream, just whisk that together and use that. But I'm just gonna use the milk. So now, everyone's oven is a little different, and also it depends on your thickness of your biscuits. I'm going to say 15, at this size, this thickness, 15 to maybe 17 minutes. They will rise, beautiful golden brown on the bottom. You can, I just typically, if you make biscuits a lot, you can kind of just go by looks, but you could take a toothpick, insert it into the center, and it will come out clean. I do like to rotate my baking sheet front to back about halfway through baking, and I did say to you, which I didn't, if your hands are really messy, just take a little flour and rub it over your bowl, and that clean your hands up. Got to give you that little tip. So I'm going to say 15 to 17 minutes. Okay, so our biscuits are done. So put your baking sheet on a wire rack. Don't they look gorgeous? Nicely browned. Look underneath, nice and golden brown. If you put a toothpick into the center, it'll come out clean. The kitchen just smells so wonderful. I'm going to let them cool down a little. I like them warm, but they're too hot right now. And then when we come back, we will try one. So I did let the biscuits cool down just a little. Let's try one. Look at that. Nice and soft. The outside is nice and crisp. Now, it will, the outside crust will soften if you, say, cover them. Some people, just as a side note here, some people, as soon as they come out of the oven, if you don't want your outside of your biscuits to have a crisp crust, what you could do is just put a clean dish towel over your biscuits as soon as they come out of the oven, and that will keep this soft. I personally like the outside crisp, so I do it this way, just put them on a rack. Now, typically, I do like them with butter, but I'm going to be good and just taste them so I can get the real flavor of the biscuit, not the butter and the jam. Oh. The inside is wonderfully soft and tender. Like I said, the outside is nice and crisp. Real nice buttery flavor. You know, a really nice quick bread. If you didn't have any bread in the house, you make some stew or some soup, and you want something to go with it, make a batch of biscuits. In and out of the oven, no time at all. Like I said, under a half an hour you can have these. They're just wonderful. And you can cover it and store them for a day or two. Of course, biscuits, scones, they are at their best the first day. Let's just put it out there. They are. But I find the next day, you can toast them or just reheat them, maybe in the microwave, put some butter and jam. Wonderful. So you must try these. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.